screen and then we'll just jump on in. And I'd love for this just to be a discussion and a chance to talk and ask questions. So feel free to, come off mute, and then we'll go from there. So like Connie said, my name is Carissa. I work at Minnesota Interfaith Power and Light, and I'm here to talk about who we are and how Bethel can become a climate justice congregation and some other ways, even in the midst of COVID, even when we're all online, that you can work together as a church body for climate justice and creation care. So we're just going to start really quick with a grounding of just thinking about one reason that you're here today. And I know that one reason is that, this is when Bethel gathers together, but maybe when you heard, that we were going to talk about climate action or MNIPL, you were like, oh, interesting. I'll make sure that I'm there. So what's just one reason? And we have enough people that we don't have time to come off mute, but if you want to just think about this and put it in the chat, that would be awesome. And I'll just share as an example, one reason that I'm here, just in general, caring about climate change is because I'm a Christian, and I believe that caring for our world that we've been given and told to, steward and protect for future generations is a huge part of my faith and my calling, especially when I think about how climate impacts, especially marginalized and poor communities, first and worst. That's just one reason that I'm here today. And I'd love for, again, if you want to just put in the chat, we'll keep seeing people share. Maybe I'll give like 20 seconds just to reflect and start typing. And I think I'll just kind of read them as I see them. But again, you can check them out in the chat. So for future generations, very worried about the world we're leaving for my grandchildren. Okay, so already a big focus on, the people who are coming after. And for me, I feel like that's also climate justice. Like unborn people, kids, they have no choice in what's going on, but they're the ones who are going to inherit this world. Ralph says to pass this world to our children in good shape. Absolutely. And I think someone is off of mute. If you can mute yourself, there's just a couple bangs. God honored us with a beautiful creation. We want to save it for future generations. Absolutely. I mean, when you even look at this image, Earthrise is one of my favorite images of just like, everything that we love, everything we've ever known is on this tiny little, dot floating in the middle of space. And this world is not like this infinite thing that we can just keep, using and abusing and using up. And then Cynthia, I'll just say before we keep going, to use our power to protect those without power. Really beautiful. All right, so with that kind of grounding of, why we're here, why this matters, I'm just gonna go quickly over our agenda. So we're gonna talk about who MNIPL is. We're gonna talk about what is a climate justice congregation and why does that matter. We're gonna talk about ways to take action as individuals and as a community. Touch on really quickly one program we have called Climate Justice Households, which Connie asked me to touch on. We'll do a quick Q&A. And then as mentioned at 10:30, we're gonna do kind of a whiplash session of a prep meeting for a meeting with Angie Craig on March 2nd. So it's coming up soon, where faith communities in CD2 and the District 2 are gonna share why their community cares about climate action and wants her to as well. So we're really excited for a really exciting morning together. So we're gonna start with just, baseline who we are at MNIPL. Our mission is to build the interfaith climate justice movement in Minnesota. And we have about 500 congregations who some are super active, some are just getting active and just getting connected, but that are working together across faiths, across traditions, and across geographies for this mission. And one really key concept you can kind of see on the left is we really value empowering others to empower others. So you can kind of get an example. We use something called the snowflake model. So you can kind of see it's in the middle of this little map of people. We have movement builders, which are key volunteers and also staff who, have leadership and organizing, maybe training or support. Maybe we have a Lutheran movement builder. We have a movement builder in Duluth, all over the state. And they're helping these leaders, you can kind of see those people, And we call those community connectors. Those are people who represent like their faith community. So for example, Bethel Lutheran. And then that faith community has so many people, more than just 5 individuals. But that way we can share opportunities for taking action, whether it's statewide climate actions or, hey, there's a way to get solar really quickly with hundreds and even thousands of people way more efficiently because we're already in community, these faith communities. But also, you know, say a church is doing something really cool, you can maybe see the arrows are actually flowing back into the movement of, oh, look, we're doing this cool opportunity here at Bethel and we want to share it and cross-pollinate ideas with other congregations around the state. So that's really our model. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But one really also key concept at MNIPL is a 3-legged stool of taking action as congregations, because we really believe that that there's such power for climate action in faith communities grounded in spirituality, values, community. Oh, I think someone's talking in the background if you want to mute yourself. So we really believe, if you can kind of see my hands or the stool on the screen, that, you know, there are 3 ways of taking climate action: practical, systemic, and spiritual and relational. So I'll just say those super quick so you know. But a lot of faith communities think practical climate action is the only thing that they're going to do. Like, we're going to start composting, that practically reduces our waste, or we're going to, you know, get solar panels, or we're going to start, you know, a garden that's going to practically make an impact. And that's all super, super important and necessary. However, even, you know, if Bethel did everything to reduce waste and have 0 carbon emissions, it's really not going to make a dent, unfortunately, in our bigger world and our bigger country for what we're doing to the climate crisis. So that's where also systemic action is super key. And that's where you're actually using your faith voice to change the system itself. So, you know, when we think about the meeting with Angie Craig, where we're going to be sharing with tons of faith communities, really, you know, a 1-minute story about why we want her to lead on climate this year and beyond, that's helping change the system itself. And then spiritual and relational is the last leg, and that's really essential too. It's connecting, you know, how does my faith and my spirituality make me care about the climate crisis or care about my neighbor, or it's talking about, you know, this with other people, because that's such an essential part of fighting the climate crisis, just talking about it with people, building relationships. So that's just our 3-legged stool. It's a really, really important concept that we believe in, whether you're taking action as a family or you're doing it as a church. So 2 things to be aware of as we work at MNIPL, supporting faith communities, bringing them together. We like to view it as either a butterfly, like you need 2 wings to fly, or a bike, like you need 2 wheels to ride your bike. So these 2 things are happening at once: leadership development and then on-ramps to taking action. So the first one, leadership development, we have a Be the Spark training that helps build actually, you know, organizing and leadership skills, where you're like, well, I'd love to take action with my faith community, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get people together or make goals or get people, you know, talking about climate change. So that's a really essential training. We used to do them in person. Now we're doing them on Zoom, of course. And our Movement Builder program, which I mentioned before, is really empowering volunteers to support communities, bring them together, share ideas of what you're doing for climate action. Youth in Power is a summer youth camp that we do. It's based in the Twin Cities, but we're hoping to expand it even more to help kids learn about environmental justice and how they can use their voice. And then on-ramps to action, if you see the other wheel, so to speak. And this is just like a smattering of ways to get communities into action, but we have a solar program that helps communities either get it on their roof or subscribe to community solar gardens. We have energy efficiency work to help congregations do that. We have a lot of work on the Line 3 pipeline, which you've probably heard in the news. We have a big presence there. You know, actions or policy on ramps to action to actually change and impact Minnesota and federal policy. Climate justice households, we'll talk about that in a minute, but actually helping, you know, households and families within a congregation take climate action together. And there's so much more, but that just gives maybe a little taste of kind of both areas that we work on. And here are just some images of our interfaith climate movement in action. Obviously, all of these are pre-COVID. We're not doing in-person things right now. But yeah, lots of stuff going on around the state. So I'm going to pause there. That was just hopefully a really quick overview of MNIPL. And I'd love to answer any questions or clarifications you have. And then we're going to go into like, who are you at Bethel as we think about taking action for climate. So I'll just pause right there.
Carissa, is there like IPL in other states, or is this unique to Minnesota?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so there's a national interfaith power and light, and then I think there's like 30 statewide chapters. So Minnesota is one of them, and they're all around the country. And that's a great question. So we actually partnered with IPL a lot in the election, doing the climate justice voter campaign. So helping people talk about, voting and what's at stake, and especially in your values, not about parties, of course. And so we partnered with IPL and lots of other state chapters, and we're doing more kind of to work with them, but they kind of also have their own like federal stuff going on, if that makes sense. So yeah, great question.
And Carissa, this is Nancy Sparby, actually not Michael. Can you speak just for a second? Are you located in Minneapolis, your main office? Is that correct?
Yeah, great question. So we have 13 staff, and most are located in the Twin Cities. Our office is in Minneapolis. And then we also have a Greater Minnesota director who lives in Duluth. And then again, kind of going, if I go back to our movement builders, that's where the power of this really comes in, because, for example, we have a Methodist movement builder who lives in Chatfield, and she's starting to work in southern Minnesota because, that's where we're really trying to empower people in other places who actually are across the state in building these networks and supporting maybe their neighbors or other congregations and doing this work. So yes, our office is in Minneapolis.
And then just a quick follow-up that I've been thinking about you and your office and your employees, especially in the past year and since George Floyd and so on and the unrest. Can you speak again just a second about how maybe your focus or you were affected by the events of the past year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So of course, all of our work moved online in March, and we were really grateful. Oh, there's also a question if we work with other organizations like Isaiah. And yes, absolutely. We do a lot of especially policy engagement work, like the 100% campaign, like our meeting with Angie Craig. Isaiah has also been supporting and working on that meeting. But yeah, so with George Floyd specifically, the office is located on Lake Street. So there was boarding up of the building and all of that. And luckily we were not, broken into. And so that was fine. But one really essential thing that I guess I didn't actually touch on, and I'll go back to our little bike image, is environmental justice, really highlighting, especially for faith communities, but for all of our networks, how climate justice needs to be linked to racial justice, or else it's really not climate justice, because these systems that have led to oppression of Black and brown bodies and communities are the same systems that have led to, unfortunately, the crisis that we're in. When we think about, there are sacrifice zones where, that's where the power plants go in poor Black and brown communities where they have higher asthma. All of these things are so interconnected. And so we really believe that to have climate justice, we have to talk about and prioritize racial justice as well. And one thing I'll just say super fast, our goal is to have that central in all of our work, but especially with solar, when you think sometimes solar can be really like a big barrier to get into, especially if maybe your community or your house or your congregation or whatever doesn't have money down to pay or something like that, or sometimes for a solar garden, you need a good credit score and you need a driver's license. When we help get individuals or congregations into community solar gardens, we only work with companies that don't require credit scores and don't require driver's licenses, because that removes kind of a barrier from certain populations being able to participate. So any other quick questions? Hopefully that quickly touched on that, but I can explain more if you want. Awesome. Okay, well, let's hone in a little bit on Bethel. So I just want you to think just for a little bit, and you can even come off mute if you want. We're not going to spend forever on this, but just think about your own congregation. Like, what is Bethel's unique story and vision? Like, what makes Bethel unique? What have you been up to on climate? I know just a little bit. It sounds like amazing stuff. And how's COVID been impacting your community? So that's like a lot of really big questions at once. So we're not going to be able to have people respond to all of them, but maybe if you just want to come off mute and share like 1 or 2 sentences for one of those questions.
One thing that we go back to 2005 when Pastor Tim encouraged us, and that was through Mission and Justice, to have a series on global warming. We used that term at the time. And we had a 3-part series. And following that, we then went on to invite Will Steger to come to our church and to do one of his presentations, Eyewitness to Global Warming. And it was a huge community event. We had 450 people attend. And at that time, we did a huge advocacy campaign for the national movement against climate change. So that was kind of the start. And then we have solar on our roof. That was, a big thing that happened. And then we've done lots of smaller things with single-use plastic, composting, and so forth.
That's amazing. Thanks for that summary. Anybody else want to touch on maybe Bethel's, like what makes your community unique, or how's COVID been impacting your community? And I'll just say, I work with a lot of faith communities, and COVID has, of course, been really, really impacting so much, like every single community. So it's kind of an obvious one, but.
Well, we're not meeting in person right now, except for some small groups, which just got increased up to about 25. But our congregation has been putting in air circulation systems so that there's fresh air coming in, and to make it safer in all parts of the building.
Awesome. And then the last thing just to think on, and I know we could spend a lot of time kind of really digging into, what makes Bethel unique, but anybody want to share? I mean, just from what I'm hearing is like a community that has very passionate and smart people and is already committed to climate justice. And like having a huge Will Steger event with 450 people, like that's just really impressive. So I'm just going to say what sounds like makes your community unique is just a lot of driven, smart, passionate people. Is there anything else that would be important to add in there?
We've just adopted a welcoming statement that's extremely inclusive. It started out with reconciling in Christ, but it's welcoming to every group possible.
Awesome, that's important context too. All right, well, hopefully that little space of just reflecting on what makes your own community unique will help us as we go into our next part. Because that, again, is really what MNITL believes in. We believe in faith communities taking action that is empowering, like exciting, and unique in their own context, because every community is completely different, and that's really the power of this movement. So we're going to talk about a program that we have called Being a Climate Justice Congregation, a certified climate justice congregation. So there's 5 parts of this, and the goal essentially is not just to check off a list, but the goal is really to give congregations just a simple kind of overview of what can really, really help be some good starting points for committing to climate justice in the future. So as you read them, you might think, hey, we're already doing that, and that's great. Then you just like check that one off the list. So some congregations, like this is a big thing of like, oh, wow, we have never talked about climate change before. And for some, they're like, oh, I'm already doing a lot of this. And we want them all. So the main part of being a certified climate justice congregation is to have a climate action plan for the year. One thing that we really believe at MNITL is the power of setting goals, SMART goals, in fact, which we'll touch on in just a moment, but really clear goals instead of like, oh, we'll take care of the climate. I don't really know what that means. You don't really know if you achieved that by the end of the year. You don't know what you learned. So working with MNIPL staff to actually set SMART goals with that three-legged stool for the community, which is so, so powerful. Like I said, for looking back the next year and what did we learn? What did we accomplish? What can we share with other congregations? It just gives that kind of drive. The second thing is host some kind of MNIPL event in your faith community, virtually, of course, at the moment. But normally we do a climate conversation after worship in person. And that's just a chance for the community to talk about climate change. Sometimes it's the first time it's brought up, especially in connection with faith. Sounds like that is not the case for Bethel. So maybe a different event would be meaningful. But honestly, this is an MNIPL event. So again, you could check that off. But there's coaching sessions for maybe your green team where staff or movement builders could come, or you could have a line 3 discussion or a solar house party. There's so many MNIPL events that could be done. But again, you've already had one now. The third one is just assigning a community connector to be the point person between MNIPL and your community. So, you're getting community connector action alerts and emails, and you're saying, like, for example, hey, there's this Angie Craig meeting. We really want to participate. I'm going to connect us into that. So just that kind of one person. There might be more people who are active, but you have this appointed community connector. So at least you have one. You might have more than one. And then the fourth one is just attend to be the Spark training. I mentioned it earlier, but this training really gives really valuable skills for organizing and building power in your congregation. So, at least one person should attend this training. If it's not possible, of course, totally fine. And we can share the key concepts, through conversation. And then the last part is becoming a sustaining congregation. Now, we know that this is not possible for some congregations, but it's important for us to ask since we're a nonprofit. So if a congregation's willing to, support MNIPL with a yearly gift of $500 or whatever is appropriate for you, or if that's nothing, that's totally fine too. Those are just kind of the 5 pieces of becoming a certified climate justice congregation. I'll just pause for 1 sec, see if there's any quick questions. And we'll explain more as we go, but oh yeah.
Are gifts from congregations your only funding?
That's a great question. No, they're not our only funding. We also get grants and we have individual donations. And again, since we have a solar outreach manager, we actually also get, some funding from that, from helping get people solar. It's kind of complicated, but we really believe that grants are super important, but the more funding that we can get and the more kind of buy-in and support from individuals, congregations, the more freedom we have to not be as constrained by grants, if that makes sense. So those are all the different types of funding. Awesome. Okay, well, I'll keep going. Here's just what a SMART goal is, super fast. They're specific, they're measurable, they're activating, reasonable, and they're time bound. So I'll just say them so fast. And this is probably something that you don't even need to be taught about. Sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So you want a specific goal, like, oh, I'm gonna get 10 people to come to this event in April. Like now you know if you've achieved it. Same with measurable, right? Activating, is it an inspiring goal? Is it something that you actually want to achieve, right? Like you want to pick something that the community will be excited about. Reasonable, of course, is like, can this actually be done? Like you probably wouldn't say like, we're gonna have a meeting with Joe Biden in March and we're gonna get 100 people there. I don't know if that's quite reasonable. And then time bound, like when do you want this to be achieved by? So again, you can look back and see, hey, did we achieve that? What happened? What did we learn? So I'll just give you a super quick sample CJC, that's what we call it, action plan. But again, it totally depends on the community. So a practical goal could be, 10 households or families in my church will enroll in the Climate Justice Household Program, and they'll support each other and they'll do that. And they'll practically reduce their emissions. Systemic, like 10% of our community or 50 people, whatever, of my church will send an email to Angie Craig about federal climate action in 2021. And that's, again, part of our meeting on Tuesday, but that's just an example. And then spiritual and relational, like we will incorporate prayers referencing climate change or care of creation into our prayers at least once a month. It's an intentional way of building it in as a high priority. So again, those are just examples. There's no right or wrong here. But of course, the more smart you can get, the better, because again, you can see if you achieved it. So why become a climate justice congregation? There's a couple of reasons. Really having concrete goals during this time of uncertainty, like I said, is just really, really valuable. Having something important for the community to buy in and do together is powerful. And like I said, sharing stories is one of our highest values. And to be honest, we started this program right before COVID. We started in 2019. So we have, I think, about 40 congregations kind of in the process. 16 are certified, they're all done. And then of course, COVID came in and changed a lot of congregations' plans. And what we're excited about is every Earth Day from now on, that's kind of gonna be the opportunity to gather stories from congregations, share out what happened, what's been learned. And then other congregations can learn from those stories, from those pictures or videos, and maybe incorporate them into what they're doing in the future. So it's a chance to get out your story of what you want to share with the wider network around the state. Ongoing support and coaching from MNIPL, as I mentioned before. And sometimes it's helpful to just have legitimacy within the power structures of your own faith community, right? Like, oh, we're a climate justice congregation, so, let's make climate a priority in our prayers or something like that. So any quick questions there? Just a couple of reasons why this is valuable. And one thing I'll add too that I didn't put on here, it really is meant to be like easy, not to be a huge time suck. If you go back to the list, all of these things, the climate action plan might take a little bit of time because you want to be strategic, but the rest of the things should be things that are just a value add that help your congregation. And they're not like something, oh my gosh, it's so much work that we have to do on top of everything else. All right, so I'm going to show you this. This is a little overwhelming, but this is our Trello board. Maybe give a thumbs up if you have ever seen a Trello board before. If not, that's totally fine. I'm seeing no thumbs up. So Trello is a website that we use to kind of collate and keep track of all the different, climate action opportunities and resources that are going on right now. And it is not a comprehensive list at all. And Denise, I think you're off of mute. But anyway, you can kind of see here, and we're not going to spend a ton of time on here, but if you're thinking like, okay, what are we going to do for our action plan for the next year? You can kind of look at this column of systemic change opportunities. I'm going to, click on one of them, and then this little box pops up and you can kind of read more about the opportunity. You can see next steps. So it's just kind of a toolbox in one spot, and we can work with you to show you, how to use it. If it's not helpful, that's totally fine, but that's something that you'll get if you're interested in becoming a climate justice congregation. And one nice thing too is this toolbox, it also just has resources on, organizing concepts like, why is it important to have one-to-one conversations to get more people involved? Or why is it important to have SMART goals? These basic things that really, really do make the difference. I'll just say super quick, and I'm sure you've seen this before, but my church, we're meeting with Betty McCollum because we're also doing these, virtual meetings about federal climate action. And I invited people with our church email, which is great, but I've learned, through these organizing concepts that I need to invite people individually if I want them to come. So I thought about, and my green team, like 3 people we could invite personally. And I invited one of my friends who would not have come if I had not invited her, like given her a text ahead of time. And she was a super crucial part of the meeting, of getting people excited, helping make a plan. And so that was just a reminder for me, like, oh yeah, these concepts really work. So just a quick little aside. So if you're interested in this, again, the hope is that this is just a value add, just something that is helpful and meaningful. But the next steps are to fill out the interest form to become a climate justice congregation. And we have the links here, and I'll be sharing this slideshow with Connie, and she can share it with all of you after. You'll next be connected with MNIPL staff or a movement builder volunteer. Again, it really depends on the area and what you're interested in. Some congregations, like say if there was one in Rochester, we have a Rochester movement builder who's retired clergy. He knows the community super well. He would probably be the best point person to support you and answer questions and help you make your SMART goals. But it really depends on the context, right? So probably here would be MNIPL staff, since we don't have a Northfield movement builder at the moment. And then you'll work on your action plan with your congregation. I recommend that like a creation care team works on this. So it's just kind of a smaller group, but you could spread the word to everybody and say like, hey, on Wednesday, we're gonna get together and MNIPL staff is gonna be there and we're gonna, really hash out what are our goals for the year. And then you'll wanna, get approval, of course, for those goals. You'll want to submit your action plan. And as you can see here, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but there's a place where you just submit it like, hey, here's our goals. Here we go. And then you're going to reflect on your goals in early spring 2022, so next year. And then again, as I said, your story and accomplishments, really whatever you want to share, will be celebrated during Earth Day. I'll just touch on that super fast. On Earth Day, we, at least this year, you're going to be hearing more from Earth Day soon, but we're planning on having kind of a big virtual opportunity to have a meaningful speaker for faith communities to listen to. We're going to have resources for faith communities as well. But during that kind of online virtual time is part of when we're going to be honoring our climate justice congregations and showing people like, hey, here's where you can see more of their stories and like click here, since we won't have time to show all of their stories. So any questions about next steps? And this is where having a community connector, who I would say is probably Connie, kind of being the person who like fills out the interest form, kind of gets in touch with all of you. That's where that's really helpful. So you're like, who would fill out the interest form? Having that specific person. Okay, so I'll leave that there. And again, you'll have these slides. So we're just going to touch on super quickly climate justice households, because that was mentioned earlier, and I just want to explain what that is really quickly. So this is an opportunity, we really believe at MNIPL in that three-legged stool. We know that we're not going to solve the climate crisis just by, in my own house, becoming zero carbon or composting all my food. But we also know that that's a super, super essential part of changing the culture, of changing how families are talking about this. And families can also do a lot of spiritual and relational and systemic climate actions from home. So it's kind of like a three-legged stool, but for your family instead of for your whole church. But what you can do is host a family-friendly virtual take action or climate action from home event this winter and spring. It's hosted by Johanna, who's kind of organizing these climate justice household programs. And then in that event, it's about an hour. You'll learn about this program, how you can actually calculate your family's carbon footprint, and then you can set goals as a family of what you want to do in the next year. So again, similar to climate justice congregations, but you don't get certified. And kind of a fun thing that other congregations have done is say you get like 10 families, including kids or whatever families want to join together, then, monthly you can get together or have an email thread of saying like, hey, I just discovered that you can get a free composting bin here. Like, oh, cool, we're going to share this idea, or, just troubleshoot, share ideas, support each other as a community. So I'll pause there. Any questions about climate justice households? Oh, and I see, are there other congregations in Northfield who have connected with your organization? Yes, we have a bunch of them, but at the moment, we don't have, like I said, a movement builder who's connecting them together or supporting them. And it really does kind of emerge with people who are interested in taking that lead. So if you're interested in that, please let me know. You can email, again, I'll send my email after this, but carissa@mnipl.org. Like, for example, we just started a group in the West Metro suburbs, so kind of like Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, and there are about, I think, 6 or 7 congregations in there that are meeting monthly. They're supporting each other and thinking about specifically West Metro suburbs, things that they can do. So it's kind of cool. Okay, well, I will move on. Well, look at that, it's 10:20. That was very efficient. So any questions? Like I said, but we've done questions a lot, so probably not. And maybe we could even take like a 2-minute screen break or something. And then I hope that you stick around until 11 a.m. because again, we're going to talk about, we go back to the three-legged stool, a systemic action opportunity that you can take right now as a community. And it's easy and it's fun and it's cool. So Connie, does that sound good? Maybe like a 2-minute break, and then hopefully folks will stay on, and we'll probably end before 11 a.m. since we have extra time. Does that sound good? I hear no complaints, so I'm going to stop my screen share. And yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Again, I hope you stay. We'll just take a now maybe 90 second. I'm going to set my timer. Just screen break, maybe get some water, stretch your legs, and then we'll come back together. And I'm excited.
Do you have time for a question?
Oh yes, definitely.
I'm Noel Stratmo, and Lois and I are watching and intrigued. We agree with climate change, and you can just watch the birds and where they migrate. They're changing their migration habits. We also agree that the pipeline is a serious environmental issue. My question for you is, where does your organization propose, how does your organization propose removing oil from the economic equation?
Ooh, that's such a great question. I probably won't speak.
I got time.
Yeah. Well, hopefully everyone can, take a break or turn off your screen while I answer. But yeah, we really believe in a just transition from fossil fuels. We believe, again, grounded in faith and values, that, families' jobs are so important, but we also know that we can't keep burning fossil fuels, and we need to transition to clean, just renewable energy sources. So, what we are working on is the 100% campaign in Minnesota, which is working to get 100% clean energy in Minnesota by 2045. And I'd love it even faster, but just having that standard is really, really essential.
I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I should have maybe focused my question more carefully on not the consuming of fossil fuels for energy, but the fact that oil is prominent in most everything we use, everything from plastic bags to window frames. Mm-hmm. And what would you replace it with?
Yeah, well, I'll just say really quick, that's part of the opportunity to meet with Angie Craig that we're going to do in about a minute, because we do need sweeping federal action. We can't do everything, unfortunately, as a state or separate. And that's where, the federal government has so much money to invest in alternate sources of, heating and energy. And I think when we think about oil and plastic,
you're back to heating and energy. I'm speaking of products that we use that can.
Yeah, I think that, for example, plastic, which uses a lot of oil, like you said, we do need to move away from single-use plastic. We need to move to alternate ways of creating these objects. But I'm not like a scientist who's a pro on how to switch from plastic to other things, but knowing that we can use biodegradable bags for things, or make sure that companies can't just give you tons of plastic packaging and things. Again, I'm not the policy or scientific expert, but I do know that if we have kind of the political will, especially in the federal government, that we know we need to move off of these things, strongly reduce them, that's more likely to happen, at a federal level than it even is at a state level. So, and also I think just I think that plastic is super bad. I've learned a lot more about recycling it and how it doesn't recycle like aluminum does and other objects. And so, yeah, got to get off of it. But there's really no way to do that except for systemic action.
Input there's more products being developed now from hemp and corn, the corn ethanol plants out of Iowa for one, and some bamboo. So there are renewable products that can replace, like plastic bags and things like that. We have to invest more in that and start moving in that direction.
Exactly. Well, Judy had a question. Yeah, confused about the March 2nd meeting with Angie Craig and today's 11 o'clock session. Yeah, we're actually going to end at 11 and hopefully even before. We'll see how efficient we are. But yeah, we'll talk about that starting, I think now. My alarm went off, so we're all good. And Noel, that's such a great question. I do want to respect people's time, but you know, this is a really, really complex issue. I'll just say, when our whole society has been built for hundreds and hundreds of years on using fossil fuels, using plastic, you know, extracting things. And so changing that mindset really quickly to, oh, like, we don't own the earth, we actually are part of the earth and we want to respect it and we want to not consume as much. And now we're aware of plastic and oil. It does require a lot of work. And that's where I think the power of faith communities come in, especially with this meeting with Angie Craig, for example, to start to change people's perspectives and have people demanding something different. Because as it was mentioned, I can't remember who said it, but what we invest in is what will eventually, you know, come to pass. If we invest in alternatives to, for example, plastic, that's what we'll get to more quickly than if we don't. So I'm just going to jump on in. So what is this all about? That was a great question Judy just asked. This spring, MNIPL is helping to organize these virtual meetings with Angie Craig, your congressperson, and faith communities in the district. And in this meeting, we're going to have, you know, Bethel is, an opportunity to share a really short story or statement about why you want bold federal climate action in 2021. So our goal of this little short time together, we've been doing these prep meetings. They're normally an hour, but we've condensed it here, and so it'll be great. But our goal is to really quick learn more about federal advocacy, like why and how it matters. And Noel, that touches on your question right there. We're going to work together to prepare and vote on it actually can't be 2 minutes, so 1 minute story about why your congregation wants federal climate action. And you're going to decide on the speaker for the March 2nd meeting. Now, if you are not the speaker, we still want you to attend, because the more people of faith who are present with Angie Craig on the virtual, you know, Zoom room, the stronger our message will be, like, oh,